Reddit, what is the most faked up way you got back at someone that wronged you? Throwaways encouraged. Too late to the thread, but this is a good story. Everyone has worked with someone they hated. I've never had a job where there wasn't someone who made my life miserable or whose very presence pissed me off. Usually you just have to put up with them, but every once in a great while, you can get even. Dave was a dick. Stoop-shouldered, balding, in his 50s, Dave was a patronizing and irritating bastard. He'd been at IBM his whole career, had been making good money, and hated contractors. He thought they were bad for the company, that the only people worth a shit were regular employees, and he made it his personal priority to fuck with all of us. Nothing overt, but constant subtle pressure was put on everyone whose badge said contractor on it. I think he developed this attitude from working with the guys from India, probably because they were so soft-spoken and accommodating, but maybe he was just a racist. I dunno, but whatever the reason, he took every opportunity to send us on little errands, wouldn't get back to us if we needed something, criticized anything we did, and generally made our lives hell in a way that couldn't be directly protested. I was pretty good friends with the guy sharing the room with him, another full-time employee, and one day Robert called me up. We are going for coffee. Okay, let me just finish up a few things. You don't understand. We need coffee now, right? I headed over to his office, and he met me about halfway there. His eyes were shining with glee, but he wouldn't tell me what was going on until we had our coffee in the cafeteria. Once we finally had a table, he said, "Okay, Dave's a fetish wrestler, huh? He's a fetish wrestler, dude, I've got nothing." What the fuck is a fetish wrestler? It turned out that there were men who pay women to wrestle them into submission. Some of them did it as a sort of hobby and others were extremely serious about it. Dave was one of the latter. Several times a year, he'd tell his wife he was meeting up with old army buddies, but went to fetish wrestling conventions instead. They were highly organized, had rings set up for use, referees to score the matches and everything. I never quite understood the need for Fs, but hey, it's not my fetish. There were web pages devoted to the women who were available to wrestle, and Dave's favorite was a woman named Red Robin. She was a little tiny woman who was an absolute beast, and he paid her thousands of dollars every time he'd go to one of these conventions for her to wrestle him for about 20 minutes per match. We went back to my office and pulled up Red Robin's website. Why does he pay this woman to wrestle him? She's ugly as hell. Do they fuck after? He says no. Let me get this straight. Dave lies to his wife, flies out to California to have an ugly woman named Red Robin wrestle him into submission, pays her $400 per match, and doesn't fuck her. Yep. Bullshit. I went onto the main wrestling site and started reading Dave's posts, and there were a ton of them. He talked in great detail and depth about the sport, had invented his own move, called the Twisted Ostrich, and told stories about amazing matches he'd won and lost. Look, I'm all about people's private lives remaining private, and I probably wouldn't have done anything if he hadn't so consistently been a fuck to me. But he had, so game on. I registered a fake account under the name Sue_Plex on the wrestling website and started corresponding with him. I started by asking him some technical questions about the Twisted Ostrich, but it wasn't long until he started asking me personal questions. As time went by, I fleshed out the character, so within about a month he had become quite good friends with Miss Plex. I told him I was a late 20s single lawyer living in DC. My marriage had ended because my husband just didn't understand my interest in such a harmless sport. It was so nice to talk to someone like him who really understood me. It was unbelievably satisfying. Every time he'd send me on some stupid errand, I'd think of how he was confessing his private life to the character I'd created. Oh, and he lied his ass off. He dropped a good 10 years and his wife somehow. Finally, he asked for a picture. Well, I'd already downloaded a whole set of a girl who looked about that age, and the photos didn't look professional. I started with a simple one, and he gushed about how hot I was. Over the next few weeks, I sent him more and more photos, each more revealing than the last, until the girl was fully nude, but didn't look posed. He started trying to be really sexy, and started talking about how the best way to end a good wrestling match was with sex. Hold the phones. He'd told Robert that there wasn't any sex at the matches. I probed a bit, and he finally admitted he had sex with the girls he wrestled. I faking knew it. They were hookers working a special kind of crowd. It made more sense he was spending $400 per match. I amped up the sexy talk too, including wrestling into it. It was gold. He was hooked. His work slowed down. He became obsessed with Sue_Plex, and quite frankly, my work suffered as well, having to answer all his notes. Fortunately, he didn't notice, because he was too busy sending off love letters. Now it was driving me nuts, because here was this creepy 50'ish guy who was still giving me a daily ration of shit, but was secretly having an online affair with a character I'd created. Robert and I had a ton of fun faking with the poor guy, but one day, he called me up again. Coffee. Now. At the cafeteria he told me that Dave had another army reunion coming up, and we should see if we could get him to come to DC to meet Sue instead. Genius. I sent Dave an email and said we should get together sometime. Boom. In a flash, he responded that he had been thinking the same thing and had some time off in a few weeks. Would I be interested in him coming to visit? Yes. Yes, I would. To Sue. I arranged to meet him in DC at local hotel. As the day approached, Dave became more and more excited and faked with us less and less. He still tried, but the conviction and heat wasn't there anymore. Robert and I were going nuts, having to act like nothing was going on while Dave prattled on about how happy he was to hook up with his old army buddies, what a fun trip it would be, how he was hoping he didn't get pinned down by the snow, etc. I guess he thought he was being clever, but since we already knew the entire story, it just came across as pathetic. He left early on a Friday to catch his flight, smiling like a champ. Tuesday morning, he showed up looking like his best friend had died. We asked what was wrong, and he tried to play it off, like he was just tired from his long weekend, but as soon as he could, he sent Sue a message asking what the hell had happened and why hadn't she showed up. We waited to respond until after lunch. He was a basket case. Finally we fired back a furious message that we'd called his house on Friday just to leave him a message, and some woman answered. We said we'd pretended to give her a survey and we knew about his wife and 4 kids. So he'd been lying to us all along. Basically, we went batshit crazy on him. We told him if he ever tried to contact us again, we'd tell his wife everything. We waited for him to get the email, watched him surreptitiously read it, and then we watched him have a meltdown. He started sweating like crazy, called his wife to check on her, and finally left early. He was never the same after that. He pretty much stopped messing with contractors and kept to himself. We never sent him any more emails, and he never sent any to Sue. My contract ended not too long after that, and that was the last I heard of him. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Edit. Motor Sagmanen gave me Reddit gold for this story. Thanks man. Edit 2. Multiple people have called me out for plagiarizing this story from a book, then linked the actual book I supposedly stole it from. Funny thing, that's my book. I wrote it. The name The War Lizard Chronicles, the author name, War Lizard, and hell, since my picture is on the cover, all of those things should help clarify things. I used to live in a very small town, like 250 to 300 people. We had no stores, gas stations etc. One day a local guy decided to open up a little store that sold the basics like groceries and rented movies. He hired a few of us high school kids to work the store and promised us $50 a week for the summer, to be paid at the end of the summer. We agreed and started working. We gave up a summer stocking shelves, cleaning the bathroom, lawn care and whatever else. Well, the end of the summer comes around. It's the last day of work, and he comes by with our paychecks. $50 for each of us. For the whole summer, needless to say, we weren't too happy, but his words were, "What the fuck are you gonna do about it? Drop the key off at my house, since you won't need it anymore." We came up with a plan to pay this douchebag back. Before locking up the store for the last time, we left a window unlocked. We dropped the key off at the house. Around midnight, we were back at the store. Grabbed as much as we could, cigarettes, money from the register, candy, probably about $1,000 worth of sheet, locked the window, then left through the emergency exit that had no alarm. There were also no cameras of any kind. Next day there were cops there. He accused all of us of doing it, but had no proof. He ended up having to shut down the store a few months later because the town heard how he didn't pay us and stopped doing business there. Point I don't feel bad, faker deserved it. Point edit. Thanks for tripling my comment karma. Figures it's about a crime I committed 15 years ago. Should have used a throwaway. Friend and I were fishing at a local creek when my friend's brother pulled up. Being the dick he normally was, he started throwing rocks in the creek to scare the fish, and then he threw my friend's bike in the creek. We were 13 at the time. My friend was crying, and I felt so bad. I jumped into the creek and got his bike out, told him we would get his brother back. Point about a month later we were fishing again, and it was the dead of summer. I told my friend today is the day we get his brother back. Caught a 2/3 pound carp, threw it up on the side of the bank, and left it there until we were done fishing. At the end of the night went back to his place. His brother's car was sitting on the street. We took the carp, sliced it open, and threw it under the driver's seat, and rolled his windows 3/4 up. Point the next morning, when we woke and left, I forgot about what we had done. Well, when I rode past JT's car I noticed the window was kind of black, and then I took a closer look. It was covered in flies. I actually got scared because I did not expect to a window caked with flies. By the time I got home I was laughing in tears because his brother was always such a dick to us. Fast forward to baseball practice about 3 days later. Friend had a black eye but smiled at me when we made eye contact. His brother flipped out and ran into his house and punched him in the face. His mom flipped out on his brother. Brother was grounded for the rest of summer. His mom said that my friend would never do such a thing and he played along and acted as if he had no idea. Apparently the smell never really left the car. We nicknamed his brother Lord of the Flies. I posted this in another thread. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to a man laying next to me in my small bed, staring right at me. I looked at him all confused and told myself, oh, silly, you're having a nightmare. So I smiled at him, closed my eyes, and was about to fall back asleep when he started touching my thigh. Two things happened at once. I realized that I was only in my bra and underwear, and that I was definitely not having a nightmare. Feel like I've never felt before. Gripped every inch of my body and I think I stopped breathing. He started making his way up to my underwear, presumably to take them off. What did I do? I opened my eyes, and I shit you not said, hold on a second, I have to pee. He looked shocked, but didn't stop me as I wrapped my blanket around my body and proceeded to take a few steps toward my bathroom. Then I noticed that my bedroom door was wide open, so I bolted. I ran to my mum's room, banged on the door, and screamed about how there was a man in my bedroom. My mom came out to the hallway and had just started reassuring me that it was a bad dream when the faker dashed out of my room and toward the front door. My mom froze, but I got the biggest sense of how the fact that he tried to rap me. That's when I grabbed a lamp, ripped the cord out of the wall socket as I started chasing him, insanely waving that lamp and screaming all the profanities that my 13-year-old mind has ever heard. I chased that faker down the streets while my mom called the police. I lost him somewhere in the dark, but when the police came, got statements and started searching the neighborhood, I got my revenge. They caught him hiding in the bushes, brought him over, and asked me to identify him. I marched right up to that motherfucker, kneed him in the balls, and walked away saying hell yes I want to press charges. Edit. David Ansara 08, who gave me Reddit gold. Thank you. I was being bullied by this kid 2 years older than me in school, but I didn't want to tell the teachers or my parents because I wanted to handle it myself. Anyway, he wasn't hitting me or anything, he was just verbally harassing me during the day, but hey, I was fine with that. I had plenty of friends to chill out with, and he was a lonely bully. So we have to write a physics exam, and we all have those graphical calculators. You can write programs in them and archive them so a RAM reset can't delete the programs, only a defaults reset can. Right before the exam, he came to me and told me to give him all the cheat programs I had. Well, what he did not know is that I prepared one with wrong formulas for that dickhead. When I transferred the program over to his calculator, I had a huge smile on my face. He got a 6 for that exam, which is equivalent to an F. Sweet revenge. Did it. Thanks for all the upvotes guys. I guess it's time to clarify some things. 1. This was around 5 years ago. I was still pretty young too. Yes, I live in Germany. The best grade there is a 1, while the worst is a 6. You can compare it to the A's and F's of England 3. I didn't have any more problems with the bully, since I was about to change the school anyway and those exams were the end of year exams. Now, in my new school, I have plenty of friends, not being bullied by anyone. Partly because I changed my attitude, but also, partly because when you notice some faults about yourself, you can fix them, and become a better person. Close bracket. The best revenge is served cold. 11 years ago, I was working almost 24/7, and trying to deal with multiple deaths in the family over the period of a few weeks, no time for anything, and going nuts trying to hold it all together. My now ex decided that she wasn't getting enough attention and started faking around on business trips. Eventually I busted her flat out, taped, remember tape, a phone conversation of her talking with her friend about having great sex in Florida with a bunch of guys, and that was it. She knew I had the tape, so denial wasn't an option. I decided to run with the truth. Instead I left. Just left. Found a new place to live, and at that point, 11 years ago, simply spread a few documented facts around. Not rumors, not pupping on someone's property, just handing out documented facts. Mishandling money at work, corporate/state/federal funds. Bad news, misreporting consulting income on her taxes. Eyes hotline 800-829-0433 if anyone's interested. Wrote a couple of editors to publications showing where she'd plagiarized materials. We are both academics. End of career. When she was held up to paying me the equity on the house we owned at that time, she pled poverty and then showed up for work in a new Corvette. A few months later she moved to California and refused any payout on the house, which on the market. I called the mortgage company directly, something they're not used to, and begged her new address out of them. They have the information and aren't supposed to give it out, but when I explained the situation, the woman at the mortgage company gave it to me. My lawyer carpet bombed my ex, who simply assumed she could hide from the sheet, and I had a check in my hand within the week. So then she was broke, discredited, in the sheet with the eyes and her funding agencies. Good enough. End result. Not quite jail, but the end of her long sought academic career and certainly the end of her credibility. 10 years on, she's managing a research institute out west, but nobody respects her as anything but her office stooge and money fluffer at this point. Should I have pupped on the back? Vet? Probably, but simply the telling the truth rocks sometimes. TLDR, cheating ex held up to the light to answer all of the rest of the dishonesty of her life. Tried to take the high road and may have done okay. Edited to reflect time frame, correct spelling of house. Follow up, I've gotten a lot of flame mail and a few comments indicating that I should have simply walked away and not done anything at all. Wonderful insight from the warm safety of the internet, but it should be stressed that I did not invent anything here. I simply supplied documentation of her action to interested parties. If that results in you should feel bad because you're a dick or a petty little sheet, then so be it. If it matters, I never took money from her in any fashion. There has been some commentary to that effect. I pay my bills as I go. Unfortunately, there were a couple of things that had to happen. The mismanagement of funds issue was part of a burgeoning audit of her operation, and if I'd withheld information I would have been in violation of state and federal law as well as campus ethics requirements. Plagiarism is absolutely unforgivable in this line of work, and I always turn it in when I find it, as occasionally still happens in grant reviews and editorship. So that's a wash. I just hadn't connected the dots. So close to home. Who looks? The non-payment of my equity in the house. Should I have walked away from $17,000 out of patriarchal nobility, and because she decided to hide in another state? No. Walking away cold from her personal actions is being a man. Leaving her with my cash in her pocket out of some misplaced sense of duty is ridiculous. The eyes. Well, okay, busted. I guess I could have let that be, even though she was breaking the law. I guess you had to be there. Note that I didn't ask for any whistleblower money. Money for my time and considerable physical labor improving our house, moving costs, dislocation expenses etc., nor a dime more than what I'd put into the house. All of it for documented supplies and improvements. Given the circumstances, I think I trod the high road reasonably well, while not letting someone slide, and all these years later still think the choices were pretty good. I worked as a server in a fine dining restaurant in a touristy town in Florida. The owners, a husband and wife team, were notorious for being cruel and petty bastards, but it was 2008, and I had just been laid off, so I had to take anything. On top of that, I was engaged to be married, paying for the wedding ourselves, and planning a move to New York City as well. This could be an incredibly long story, so I will just give a few examples of their batshit cruelty. Dyslexic server who trained me fired a week after I started because he took too long to write the specials on the chalkboard. They knew he was dyslexic. His replacement. December 23rd. She was fired for selling the wrong bottle of wine. While this was definitely her mistake, their handling of it was despicable. She sold a $125 bottle of wine for $35. Restaurant prices, not the restaurant's actual cost. Those were $56 and $10. The owner let the table know of the server's mistake, saying, "I hope you are enjoying that bottle of wine. It's actually a $125 bottle. But don't worry, you don't have to pay for it. Your server will have to." Needless to say, the table was furious for being put in that awkward position, and were gracious enough to give an awesome secret tip to cover the cost. Here is the nasty part. She finished out her shift and paid the total $125 thinking she still had a job. She was fired on Christmas Eve by text message. Me. I kept quiet as much as I could. I saw that whenever you shared any bit of your personal life with these facts, they used it to torment the wife owner, follow me around the FOP, and berate me in increasingly weird ways with the intent to emasculate. Once they met my fiancé, and from that moment on, the wife owner would make jabs saying she doesn't seem like she is too thrilled to get married, or she probably expects better, and then laugh it off, like she was just joking. It was my strategy to just eat shit and save money, and not let it bother me. She figured this out right away, and got downright sadistic, trying to see how far they could push me, and see what I would do without complaint. I managed to suck it up for 2 years thanks to alcohol, no backbone, and financial need. My breaking point was when she told me to take away the chair our hostess was sitting in when no customers were around. Granted, sitting on the job is supposedly unprofessional, but she was an elderly woman, sick, working outside. The hostess wouldn't dare call in sick as she was working here illegally from Hungary, and similarly had to eat as much shit as was thrown at her. So rather than talk to the hostess and possibly take over for her sick employee, she asked me to snag the chair from her without explanation. Here is the faked up part. I did it. I faking did it. The hostess understood. Really, what could she say? She knew what was happening and gave me this look of understanding that I'll never forget. I got a few feet away and put the chair back, looking straight back at the vile sheets that asked me to be cruel to another person for her amusement. The owner didn't say a word to me about my subordination and gave me the cold shoulder for the rest of the evening. 2 weeks later, I was closing out my tips and receipts with the husband owner. I had counted my bank prior to cashing out with him as I always did. Everything added up just fine. Turns out he had secretly added in a cash ticket to my till for $150. It showed on the report he printed at 1 minute before running the cash out report. I had only 4 tables, all cash tips on all credit card tickets that night, so it was not hard to keep track of. Lucky me, I thought. I questioned this and said I had double checked my math and he must have made some mistake. His response was, "If you don't like it, there is the door." That pretty much sealed it. I knew what was happening and luckily my brain initiated the "you is about to be forced to quit, so you don't get the unemployment money's disaster recovery" response. I refused to pay him and said I will be returning to work tomorrow for my next scheduled shift and we can work this out then. He said, "Fuck you, get out." I was fired. This was very important. I was fired. I didn't quit. I was a month away from moving to New York City with my wife to try to start a career in my field. I just needed 1 more month of saving every last penny I made and I was out. This pretty much faked me. So I filed for unemployment stating the reasons I was fired on my last night, which met the eligibility requirements. The unemployment office contacted my former employer for verification, and he said I was fired for stealing wine and there were witnesses. My claim was denied. The next step was to dispute the claim. I disputed and it went to the adjudication process. Basically what amounted to a phone hearing between my former employer, an unemployment caseworker, me, and any witnesses. This is where I got revenge. I knew of the upcoming hearing, and my employer was notified by mail of the date. The letter explained the process and instructed to line up any witnesses and materials needed for the case. It also stated that you have a period of time to reschedule the hearing if needed. An unemployment worker explained the process to me over the phone before the letters were mailed. I then paid a anarchist punk guy with beer to steal any of their mail from the unemployment office and bring it to me. Leading up to the hearing I also reported them to ASCAP for playing copyrighted music in their establishment without paying dues, a fairly hefty fine, and reported some of their more crooked dealings to the eyes. Namely how the wife owner would use her name as an employee for several of the illegal workers, underreporting earnings, etc. I also dropped a dead fish into their gutters above their patio, waited a week for the rats to appear, and called the Heath Depth Point at the time of the hearing. The owner was caught off guard and tried to reschedule. He was not allowed to reschedule because the letter, which he never received, he stated that failure to attend the hearing automatically results in a ruling for the other party. He complied and we went along with the hearing without his fake witness. During the hearing I kept calm, but he lost his temper. I answered my questions in a way to really get his anger going, and it worked. The key question posed to my former employer was, had he not stolen any property, would you still have fired him? He slipped and said yes, sending the ruling in my favor. A few weeks later I received my check for all the past months of unemployment. It was enough to get me to New York City 2.5 years later. I'm still married, Beach, and found an excellent job in my field with great pay, benefits, an awesome boss, and union representation. They are struggling to keep the doors open, and have both had a host of financial problems. TLDR, I went Monte Cristo on the asshole sling and Crisco Point or got treated subhuman by a sadistic employer for 2 years, had enough, fought back and won. Dating a girl. Hot. Beautiful C-cup titties. I get monosyllabic just thinking about them now. My brother clued me into how she was cheating on me. I didn't believe it. My brother forced me to get into his car and follow her from work, where she went right to her ex-boyfriend's house. She was also faking my, at the time, best friend. I had left for a few months to Europe, where I turned down a stunning and smart girl, who ended up going to college within my field of study for this tramp. I got tested and was clean. That was a stressful wait to find that out point. While I was plotting something else, a revenge plan of opportunity popped up in the form of a P-boner. She was frustrated that I didn't want to have sex because of the STD fears when I found out about cheating, so she wanted to give me one of her excellent blue jobs. I really needed to pee. Hate can motivate a person to do some unnatural things. Normally, it's impossible or quite difficult to pee when sexually aroused. I on the other hand was fueled by the glorious unzipping of a plan that was starting to enter her mouth. She sucked. It got hard. It felt good. After a few moments, I mimicked the convulsions related to just before ejaculation. She started to apply a strong suction for the finish, and I let the dam burst open. It's almost comical how her cheeks ballooned out as urine flooded her mouth. As she was attempting to swallow only a few teaspoons of semen, she choked on the fire hose going off in her mouth, but to my surprise, instinctively stayed on to take nearly the full contents of my bladder. Cheeks ballooned out, face stretched out trying to contain all my urine. She went to the sink to spit out the contents. As she was figuring out what happened, I thought to myself, sometimes the best plans aren't planned at all. I refused the kiss. Her breath smelled like pee. In 2009 I deployed for a 6-month tour to the Helmand province in Afghanistan, running at least weekly missions from Leatherneck to Nowzad. We were the only unit that would run that route in the entire AO. It was that bad. A month into the deployment, I was just getting 6 months into my first real relationship. It was long distance, as I was stationed in NC, and she lived back home in New York. We were planning on getting married, but my staff sergeant gave me a little speech, and I decided that it was best to wait until after the deployment. She was already cheating on me 4 months into the relationship. I took it hard, and that's all I thought about for 6 months while I waited to get back home. I had a bunch of her stuff, and she had some of mine. I never got any of my stuff back, but she had given me this tiny little dancer trinket to wear on my dog tags. Her mother had given it to her before she ran off, so it had some sentimental value to her. Oh, and 5 months into my deployment, her new level 3 sex offender boyfriend who she left me for goes back to prison for probation violation. I get a message over Facebook that she just found out she's 6 months pregnant, and it's mine. There's no way you just find out you're 6 months pregnant when you weigh 110 pounds soaking wet. It was a sham to get me back. There was no pregnancy. 6 months later, I arrive back home. I go into the subway where she works, and lo and behold she's working. I walk in, and she goes "Welcome to Sue," and cuts off mid-sentence as she sees me, with a look of absolute horror on her face. I walk in, walk up to the counter, look her dead in the eyes, set the dancer trinket on the counter, shake my head, and turn around and walk out. I could hear her start crying. Before I got to the door, I'm much more successful out of the military. I have a great job, an amazing girlfriend, and a sweet townhome. I'm about to get a dog here soon. I've never blocked her on Facebook. I just don't see her updates in my newsfeed. She'll poke me every once in a while, but I never poke back. It's nice to know that she can watch me be successful without her, and I know her life is in shambles. About once a year she tries to message me and ask me how I'm doing, but it usually ends with her going on some depressing rant about how she faked up and wishes she never cheated on me and left me. TLDR, Beach cheated on me while I was in Afghanistan, gave her back sentimental item without saying a word. She's still allowed to see Facebook to see how successful I've become. Edit. There was no child. Fact: throwaways. Dated a girl who I really liked, but she was always hot and cold to me, and when she was cold, she could really treat me like a bucket of liquid sheet. It took me way longer than it should have, but I finally manned up and dumped her. She proceeded to alternately try to win me back and seduce my friends. Basically, an immature reaction from an immature person. So, couple of weeks later, I meet an amazing girl at a concert, and we start dating. This new girl is awesome, cool, fun and sexy, but within a week of dating her, I realized something else about her. My beachy ex had had a job the summer before, which had her basically spending the whole summer with a girl that she had developed a major complex about. Wherever the two went anywhere together, guys would always hit on this other girl and never hit on my beachy ex. It got to the point that my ex had developed this major anxiety complex regarding this girl she worked with. By pure random chance, I had gone out and met that girl and was now dating her. The satisfaction I felt when I showed up at a party around a month after the breakup and letting beachy ex see who I was with was immense. She had a total meltdown that included crying, screaming, and ranting, before screaming at the guy she came with, "Take me home right now, we're leaving," to which he replied, "Call a cab, psycho, I'm not taking you anywhere." It's the little moments in life that you have to cherish. Edit. Tried to make the second paragraph a little less confusing. May or may not have succeeded.